Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I often like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today, we are not in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society. We are in Bethesda, Maryland, at the offices of Dr. Emily Martinson, Doctor of Audiology at Live Better Hearing. How about that? Emily, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm really happy to be here.
So, all of you out there in podcast land, Planetary Gig Society listeners, why are we here in the audiologist office? Well, sound is pretty much an important part of music. And I just have to fess up and say that I got a brochure in the mail from Emily, just a flyer kind of a thing. I'd been thinking about my hearing wasn't so good, having trouble in restaurants, and my wife saying, that's loud, isn't it? Don't you need it that loud? And I thought, I really should do something about this. And I came in to see Emily, and the test, the whole setup was so amazing. She put this thing in my ear, and then I looked around, and on the screen there was my eardrum. The first time I'd ever seen my eardrum before. It was kind of, I don't know.
It's kind of trippy.
It is trippy. It's totally trippy. And you did really, I know the tests seemed very professional and all that, and you just said, we got these hearing aids. And I got them. I bought them, and, we can talk more about them, but I've been listening to them, and frankly, I can hear things better than I have been able to in maybe decades, So we've been having some conversations about this and thought it would be a good idea for people to hear a little bit of a conversation about the power of sound in our own lives, I guess, right?
Well, it's incredible to hear your story, Jeff, because for someone like yourself who has a musician's background, the power of sound is tremendous. Not only is the power of sound tremendous, but the question of, what happens when that sound goes away is sometimes even a bigger concern. I hear it with a lot of my patients, particularly my musician patients. They're playing their instrument, in your case, guitar or whatever instrument they happen to play, and things just don't sound right. They don't sound normal, they don't sound full, they don't sound rich. And that healing power that music can bring to all of our lives just isn't what it used to be. And it's difficult for me in that context to sometimes explain to them, it's not you. You're not doing something wrong. It's just the ear. So
right.
let's help the ear, let's fix the problem, and let's give you back the thing that you love so much, which is music.
Yeah, fabulous. Well said. So just a little bit, because I always ask this question. You had music in your background. Do you remember your parents playing? Did you have music in school? Everybody does, the old kids' songs and things like that. I know for my granddaughter, the people on the bus go, that sort of thing. But did you take piano or guitar? Did you ever dabble in music a little bit?
When I was a kid, I did. My parents really tried to give me a broad education when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school. They always really wanted me to get exposure to music, and I was really fortunate in that when I was a child, I took piano lessons at a very, very young age. As I went into later life, though,
5, 8?
Like sixth grade,
sixth
grade or so. And then as I went into college and into my adult life, I kind of didn't have that as much. I just didn't have as much way to expose myself to it. But now I'm starting to get it back more. And for me, one of the most important parts of music in my life has always been the community of it. So singing in the chorus when I was a child, even in college, I loved to go and watch live music. I loved to go and see people play instruments, see people sing, and just see the community together. So it's always been a big part of my life. I haven't had as much training maybe as somebody like yourself has, but
I'm kind of a late bloomer, or late worker.
But music and sound have always been really, really important to me.
Yeah, so then the question is, what attracted you to want to work in sound, to want to be an audiologist, to work with people in sound? I mean, is that something that you're just in school saying, well, I got to pick a major, or how did that sort of come about for you?
I kind of came into audiology in a roundabout way. My mom is a speech pathologist, and so she kind of sent me in that direction. And then when I was in college majoring in speech pathology, I had taken 2 audiology classes and just really, really fell in love with it. I would say the biggest influence on me, though, from a sound standpoint, was always my grandfather, who had one ear that was completely deaf and the other ear that had a very, very sizable hearing loss. And seeing the struggles that he had, especially as his hearing loss progressed on that side, had always made me feel that things should be better. I could see him just separating himself from groups, separating himself from conversations, separating himself from music. And I knew there had to be a better way to bring someone like that back into the community. And so that was a big influence on me and on my ultimate career choice and what I've dedicated my life to.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So what was it about the audiology classes? Because I don't even know what they would talk about in an audiology class. Can you hear this? What were the things that there must have been concepts or principles or?
Yes and no. A lot of it is science, the science of sound, the science of sound waves, the science of the ear. But so much more of it is relationships and what hearing loss has as its effect on people's lives. And that's what really, really drew me in, seeing the effects not only on music, but on communication, whether that's at the end of the lifespan, beginning of the lifespan, middle of the lifespan. We all need sound, and we all need it for different reasons.
Yeah, it's pretty important to the human condition, not just music, but, I guess safety, communication. I mean, where does it end? I mean, I guess even when you dream, you hear sounds, maybe. Do you? I don't know.
You do. There's a good amount of research that says the areas of the brain that are activated when we're listening to sounds are also activated in dreaming. And so no one really knows how the ear can affect us on a subconscious level, but there's a little research dabbling into that. It's cool stuff.
Anyway, so the sound is so very important. You're an audiologist now, and you see a lot of people who have hearing loss. I guess mainly that's what they come to you for, right? And
almost all of my patients have hearing loss, or at least have concerns about their hearing, ringing in the ears, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and how do these things develop? What are the typical things that people come in and say? I had a little bit of tinnitus. I mentioned to you, when my dad was 80, he said, I've had this ringing in my ears for 40 years. I said, Dad, why didn't you ever do anything about it? But there's not a lot you can do about it, but it is an indication of hearing loss, isn't it? Did you tell me that?
It is. Most people who have the tinnitus, they also have hearing loss. And so one kind of begets the other one. That's a really new and really exciting area for audiologists and audiology researchers because so much still isn't known about it. Treatments for that are getting better and better and better, but it's still kind of uncharted waters. Now, the vast majority of my patients that I see are people who have hearing loss. And typically, it's a pretty similar story across most of my patients where, well, I'm losing clarity, I'm losing sharpness, I'm missing conversations, people sound muffled, things like that are indicative of certain types of hearing loss. Sometimes I'll even hear things like music is losing its richness. I'm losing my ability to pick out pitches when I'm listening to music. I'm off tune when I sing. That sort of thing I hear a lot because of the way a hearing loss has manifested.
What are some of the reasons that people lose their hearing?
It can be a number of things or even a combination of things. The biggest reason that I see in my patients is genetics and the aging of the ear. There are also people who lose their hearings though because of noise exposures, certain medications, certain medical conditions, and like I said before, a combination of all of the above too. For instance, you could have someone who's lost their hearing because they have an ear that's aging, but also has a lot of music, loud music exposure, loud noise. And so it can be a combination of a couple of things. My own father, for instance, has hearing loss as a combination of the aging of his ears, his genetics, and also noise exposure because he was in the military. So it can be a combination of things all at once.
Yeah, well, when I think about how I got to the point where I really realized that I need to do something about this, and thank goodness for your little flyer, is I remember my father used to take me hunting, duck hunting, starting when I was 8. And we shot shotguns. I mean, it wasn't like shooting 1,000 shots, but, a lot of shotguns. And nobody ever used hearing protection then. And, later on I realized when I shot a shotgun without hearing protection, maybe, 8 years ago or something, which is stupid at this point, it's so loud. It's an unbelievable concussion that comes into your ears and it hurts.
It could even have wiped out some of your hearing just from one exposure to that.
Right.
It's funny.
I could have been big. I may not have really been hearing well for 50 some years.
That's completely possible. It's funny, for years and years and years, the rates of hearing loss were pretty stable. You would reach a certain age, the ear would mature, you would lose your hearing. That number went way, way up when the baby boomer generation came along. And you can probably guess why. Amplified rock and roll music.
Yeah.
Now, what's even more interesting, in my opinion, as a millennial, is that my generation's rates have gone even higher.
Ooh.
And the reason for that is the use of earbuds. So you take the combination of loud music, genetics, and certain exposures to loud things like a shot or duck hunting, that sort of thing, and it can all combine together into one big impact. Yes, one big impact on the very, very sensitive cells of the ear.
Yeah. I remember, I guess when I was a teenager, maybe, 14, 18, or maybe in college, going out to a dance and coming home and laying down in bed, and my ears would just be ringing like crazy. And I guess we all thought, oh, well, it's the way it is, but not realizing that was actually causing hearing loss.
I did the same. Yep. High school, college, I did the same. And so those ringing sounds that you heard later on, although they could have been temporary, they could also have ramifications later on in life. So for people who maybe your listeners have in the past had those noise exposures, just know that you should protect your hearing moving forward. Every noise exposure you have is additive. And so the cells become weakened, they become damaged, and they need to be protected in the future too.
So for me recently, it was, as I said, not being able to hear too well, but also really focusing on guitar in the last few years, starting as an old man. I didn't realize that I wasn't hearing that well. I knew maybe I wasn't hearing things. I had to turn up the sound more, but I didn't quite realize what I had lost. So after I got the hearing aids from you, which are very cool with the app and everything. I mean, I've got the restaurant setting and the music setting and left and right ear and all that. And it's a little bit of a pain because you got to, put them in and deal with the batteries and stuff like that. But when I play the guitar now, I feel like I'm hearing something that I haven't ever heard before.
And you may, because of those noise exposures that you had as a kid, you may not have really heard that correctly, especially if you came into the guitar after that happened.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So, and when you sing and you're a little pitchy, you're, all that has an effect. You're not able, your ear couldn't have been trained well to hear sounds if it wasn't hearing well.
Well, and how isolating can that be, right? If you're in a group and you're trying to sing and you're trying to play the guitar and you feel like, well, does everybody else sound different from me? Do I not sound the same? And that can be, for a lot of people, that can be a source of anxiety and a source of even isolation.
Yeah, it's a little easier to tune out in a restaurant or at a party when you really can't hear what anybody's talking about.
It's easy to withdraw, right? It's easier to withdraw than it is to admit, well, maybe I should look into this. Maybe I have a problem that needs to be solved. So there's usually a big amount of time between when a person suspects that they have a hearing loss and when they actually do something about it. Because it happens so gradually and so slowly, the brain can often fill in the blanks of what they've been missing. And then you come upon a situation like yourself, where I remember when you were in my office playing the guitar, I remember you saying, wow, that sounds so good. That sounds so different. Well, it's because there have been years since you've heard that correctly.
Right. And how many people have, modern Americans have this hearing loss when they get to be 40, 50, 60 years old?
It's in the millions. The rates of hearing loss are very high, and unfortunately, the rates of undiagnosed hearing loss are high as well. It's getting better, though. Audiologists and other hearing professionals and even other musicians have done a really good job of doing outreach measures to really help people be educated about hearing.
Yeah, I think there are some musicians who have, professional musicians who've had significant hearing loss and problems that, I forget the name of one that I read about recently, who had to cancel a tour because he just couldn't really hear anything anymore. That's pretty frustrating. Another little story I heard not too long ago from a colleague, a professional colleague, who said his father is in his 90s. I think he may have passed at this point, but for the last 4 years of his life or something, he'd been a beautiful piano player, and he stopped playing. And his son said, why aren't you playing anymore? And he said, the piano just doesn't sound right. Well, isn't that, what a shame if music is so important to somebody. It's so important to all of us, whether we're musicians or listeners or non-musicians or music haters or whatever. Sound is still, it's really, it's so important to us. It's, one of the senses. It's so sad that would be the situation that somebody would have.
Well, and it's sad too to know that possibly could have been something that was avoided, right? If he had, instead of just saying, well, I'm not going to play anymore, I'm giving up this really, really passionate part of my life, if he had instead said something like, well, let me see what I can do. Can it be helped? Well, maybe not, but at least explore that. Because music can be this incredibly important parts of so many people's lives that it would be a real shame. I know, at least in my life, it would be a real shame to have to cut that out completely.
Could you describe a little more about the reaction you've seen when people can hear again, when they learn how to hear? I guess that would be sort of the power of music from that kind of technical perspective.
I've seen a whole range of reactions to sounds that people have been missing, all the way from infants who are born with hearing deficiencies. So say they were born deaf, or say that their mothers during pregnancy took certain medications, or even let's say that they were given medications as neonates that are then prescribed hearing aids and they can hear again. A lot of times they just cry and freak out because it's so new and it's scary, all the way up to people who are in adulthood and who are musicians and who are passionate about music and sound, who have this very positive reaction of, wow, I didn't know what I was missing. I'm thinking of one example that really stood out with me from a couple years back. I had a woman who was in a choir at her church, And so music not only was a huge part of her lifestyle for enjoyment, it was also for socialization.
And spirituality.
And spirituality, exactly. And she was to the point where she was so frustrated with not hearing the other choir members and not hearing the notes and feeling like she just couldn't sing and she couldn't hear right, that she was fed up. So she came in, she told me her story, and we came up with a solution together. She tried the hearing aids and we played a little choir music together in the office, and she just cried. It was so moving for me because I felt like she gave me this enormous gift by sharing with me that part of her life. And I felt really blessed and I felt really honored to have shared that part of her life. So the range of emotion that I see in my patients when they're given back the incredibly important power of music has been a full spectrum. And it's really a joy for me to kind of just be along for the ride.
Yeah, well, that's great that you can help people out. They're really pretty amazing little things, these modern hearing aids. I mean, I think you said that mine have 8 speakers, eight microphones in them.
Yours have 2 microphones that point front on each side, and then on the back as well, they have microphones. And so your microphones will pick up where the sound is going, but it'll also pick up sound through specific channels processed inside the hearing aids. So the sound is picked up through the microphone in the environment. The computer inside uses 24 small little adjustment channel bands across all of the range of sound, and then adjusts for that. So it's really, really neat stuff.
It's amazing. They're just, it's wild, and it really is a big difference. So another thing I wanted to mention was I saw a TED Talk about a musician who is deaf. I think she went deaf, but she learned to play percussion barefoot by essentially feeling the vibrations of the music, even without her being able to hear. I mean, if you can do that, sort of imagine how much even better it is with these gifts of our ears and these eardrums and things.
And Beethoven did that too, didn't he? When he went deaf, he would use vibration, and he would use that to help him kind of, well, in a different sense of the word, hear the music that he wrote.
I guess that's right.
It's neat how the body compensates when it loses a sense, hearing being one of them. At the end of the day, she could probably feel vibration, she could appreciate the sound, but all of the richness that you and I experience in our enjoyment of music is just a completely different animal.
Yeah. And it's also not like with vision, where if you gradually lose your sight and you realize you can't see signs, you can't see the TV, you can't see all these things, and so you can get correction. It's pretty obvious, but it really is a slow process with the hearing, because it's hard to have metrics or a baseline. You just don't remember it almost.
It is, and the brain is this incredibly plastic, incredibly adaptable part of us that is able to fill in the blanks of what we can't hear. So as you lose your hearing, your brain tries to compensate for that. So a lot of the time, you don't even notice it's happening until it's to the point where other people are telling you it's happening. Other people are saying, well, you can't hear me. And that's the point where you realize, you know what, you're right, maybe I can't. One thing that has always stuck with me, and this was something my mom told me when I was a kid, was that Helen Keller, who was both deaf and blind, had once said that if she had to choose between being blind or being deaf, she would prefer to be blind, because that cut you off from the world from a visual standpoint, but being deaf cut you off from other people. And I think that's very true. Communication through music and through speech is just so critical to the human experience.
Yeah, and it certainly is made better being able to produce, listen, create music. It's just a fabulous thing. I mean, I know it probably sounds a little funny, but coming from people might not think so. I mean, I think better hearing helps lead to a better life, and if more people can hear better and appreciate music better, that's a good thing. It can be good for our society.
I think so too. And I think that's important, even not only from just an interpersonal perspective, but from a worldwide perspective, in that if I can communicate with you, we might not speak the same language, but we share music. We share this passion for music, and we're both hearing it the way that we should. That's an incredibly powerful tool that we can share in a way that if we aren't hearing it, we might not be able to. So I think music and hearing can really intersect to be this really important, really fundamentally powerful unification force for all of us.
Wow, well, and that's what we're striving for, right? Community is a good thing, war, not so much, but, being together, working together, trying to help each other out, it's a fabulous thing. So I just want to say thanks very much, Dr. Emily Martinson with Live Better Hearing. I appreciate what you've done for me, and thank you very much for what you do and for sharing the time and the knowledge today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. This is a great time.
All righty. Thanks, everybody. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.